Welcome, grade 6, to Unit 3 of the third semester. We're going to be reading part of Sarah Plain and Tall, which is an award-winning novel by Sarah MacLachlan. Just looking at the artwork on the screen, can you guess what the setting might be for this story? Actually, this pastel painting shows two different types of settings. This one over here with the yellow field and the house off by itself, and over here on the left side of the lady, it looks like water, perhaps the ocean. So this picture demonstrates the lady moving from one part of America to another part of America, towards the farmland of the Midwest. Okay, this is what the novel looks like. It's about a farm family living on the prairie in Kansas in about 1910. We're only going to be reading the first couple of pages of this novel. You can see it won the Newbery Medal, which is quite prestigious. So what are we going to be learning about? What skill? We're going to be learning about how to figure out what a character's thoughts and feelings are based on what the character says and does, and how to describe characters' thoughts and feelings using show, don't tell, which is not new to us. We've talked about show, don't tell before. So I want you to try to solve the anagram to discover the name of the skill that we will be learning about today. So here, an anagram of Mary is army, to demonstrate what an anagram is. An anagram is when we change the order of the letters in a word to create a new word. So it's a kind of word puzzle. So two anagrams of this word are fence rain or niece fern. I can give you a hint. It starts with in. Okay, we're not going to play hangman. Maybe I'll set that up so that you can do it on the internet. But if you can solve this, then you'll know it's inference. We're going to be learning about making inferences. Inferences are basically good guesses. So an inference is a good guess about what a character is thinking or feeling, or what their motivations are, based on clues and what we know about people. So clues from the story, things the characters do, and then also we're just going to use our background knowledge about people. So these two sources of information help us to make good inferences. We're going to watch a brain pop video about inferences.
You wrote a story? I looked around the packed theater. My knees were shaking and my heart was pounding in my chest. I took a deep breath and closed my eyes. I pretended I was alone and played my violin. Great job, Moby. I really understood how nervous you were, even though you didn't say you were nervous. I made an inference. What is an inference? When you infer, you use clues and what you already know to come up with an idea. I've heard that sound before. It's thunder. Everyone's wearing rain boots and jackets and holding umbrellas, so I can make an inference that it's raining. I don't really know for sure that it's raining because I'm not outside, but the thunder and the rain gear are clues, so I can be pretty sure it is raining. How can I make inferences when I read fiction? Let's see. In this book, the tortoise and the hare have a race. The hare makes fun of the tortoise and says she's really slow. Instead of preparing for the race like the tortoise, the hare just talks about how great he is. During the race, the hare is so sure he'll win, he thinks he has time for a nap. And the tortoise wins the race. The way characters act can tell you about how they think or feel. The hare makes fun of the tortoise, brags a lot, and then falls asleep during the race. These clues tell me that the hare is kind of stuck up and thinks he'll win the race. The tortoise gets ready for the race, ignores the hare, and goes as fast as she can. These clues tell me that the tortoise is really determined. Authors use clues and details so they don't have to write everything in exact words, and figuring out how the characters feel can be exciting. But I can make inferences in all kinds of writing, not just fiction. How can I infer when I read nonfiction? Cool, here's a book about sea turtles. Leatherback sea turtles lay their eggs on land. One leatherback can lay over 100 eggs. I wonder why sea turtles lay so many eggs. You can use what you already know to make inferences. I know that seagulls like to eat baby sea turtles. And I know that the ocean has other hungry predators. I can infer that sea turtles lay a lot of eggs because most of them will not survive. You can also use what you observe to make inferences. Ew, I bet all that trash doesn't help the sea turtles. Maybe that's one reason why they're endangered. I guess making inferences is like being a detective. You look for clues and put them together with what you already know to come up with an idea. I guess I can infer that it's time for lunch. Hey, wait for me.
Okay, so I've got some questions for you. So what is an inference? From what we just watched, we can tell that an inference is a good guess, basically. But it's more than just a guess. It's a guess that's based on some kind of evidence. So it's based on clues and what you already knew, your background knowledge. Question 2, can you be 100% sure that an inference is correct? Why or why not? What do you think? The answer is no, you cannot be 100% sure. You may be 99.5% sure, but not 100% sure. If you are 100% sure, then it's not an inference. It's a fact. Maybe in the video, there was the example of people coming in from outside all wet and wearing rain gear and the sound of thunder. And so an inference was made that it was raining outside. But it's possible that something else was going on. Perhaps there was a drama. Perhaps they were shooting a movie out on the front street. It's not likely, but it's possible, right? So there is a tiny chance that it's not raining outside, but they can be fairly sure it is. But if they go to the window and look out and see that it's raining, then it's not an inference anymore. Then it's just a fact. So how can you tell what characters are thinking or feeling? Well, you watch for clues. You look You see what they say in the story and you watch their actions. Question 4. Many animals in the forest eat insects. Why might one kind of insect look like a stick? So, think about what you know, what we know. I know that sometimes animals that, especially animals that have a lot of predators, they like to disguise themselves, use some kind of camouflage so that they can't be seen easily. And if it's in the forest, there's lots of trees in the forest, so there must be sticks in the forest. So if the animal looks like a stick, then it's probably less likely to be eaten. Okay, let's just jump ahead. Okay, I've got a short reading passage here. I'm going to read it and then ask you some questions about it, and we'll be able to make some inferences. Mary smiled broadly as she looked at her garden. She'd planted the seeds early in the autumn and had tended to the plants every day since then. She pulled the weeds so they'd have lots of space. She knew that the plants needed plenty of water, so she watered them every day too. Last Saturday, her friend Kiki called early in the morning and invited Mary to spend the day shopping and singing karaoke. They left early and they spent the whole day in Causeway Bay, had a really good time. And then Kiki invited Mary to sleep over Saturday night as well, which hadn't been planned, but they were having such a good time, she happily accepted. And when Mary arrived home on Sunday afternoon, her face drooped and her eyes welled up with tears. Well, how did Mary feel about her garden earlier on? I mean, before she went to Causeway Bay with her friend Kiki. What are the clues? Well, you can tell from what's written here that that she watered her plants every day. She pulled the weeds so that they'd have lots of space to grow. So we can tell that we can make an inference that she cared about her garden. She cared about her plants quite a bit. What happened to her garden as a result of her absence? Well, we already know that plants need to be watered and taken care of. And especially up on the roof, it gets really hot. So even a day without watering can be kind of a catastrophe for some plants. So what happened? She spent the night over at her friend's house. And then when she gets home, she looks at her garden and her face looks sad and she looks like she's about to cry. So she's something, obviously, if somebody has this kind of reaction, something bad has happened. We know that about people. We know plants need water, especially up on the roof. Without water, they may fry very quickly. And then we see her emotional reaction when she looks at her garden. So we're quite confident in our inference that her plants may have died. And how did she feel about it? Well, she's crying. So it's pretty easy to make an inference about that she feels badly. Okay, on to our story. We already found out that it's in Kansas. Can you find Kansas on this map of states? This is the United States in the year 1876. The map is different. You can see Washington. There's all these darker colored places are territories. They're not yet states. So Kansas, we can see, is in the middle, right smack dab in the middle. This is the Midwest farming country. So our story takes place in farming country. So did people living on farms in the old days have a lot of conveniences to help them? Actually, we know pretty well that they didn't. So I'm going to skip through this fairly quickly, but we do need to think about how life would have been different. We're reading a story that took place around 1910, And the things we know about life, our lives, are very different from what these characters' lives would have been. So it makes sense to think about those differences. You know, the kitchen appliances would be different. They wouldn't have had microwaves and electric appliances. They would have probably cooked over a coal and wood stove. Maybe they had a fireplace. On the farm, they wouldn't have had mechanical equipment. Perhaps they used animals as a source of power, like horses and oxen. Transportation was very different back then. Probably horse and buggy, mostly. Wagons, trains, some trains. Communication, very, very, very different. Entertainment, very different. Probably for entertainment, it would be quite interesting to think about this difference, because they didn't have mobile phones and televisions and DVDs. Probably don't even watch DVDs very much anymore. So much is streamed. But in those days, they didn't have anything like that. So how did they entertain themselves? So they sat around at night and told stories. They sang songs together, read poetry, read to each other. And I think they had the radio at that time. So early on, before the age of television, listening to the radio was a very popular family evening entertainment activity. They lived on the prairie. We should know this word from grade 5. It's a large, semi-flat or rolling, with possibly rolling hills. It's grasslands. There's a picture of the prairies. Transportation, already mentioned, horse-drawn buggy or carriage. Farmhouse kitchen. Here's a picture of a farmhouse kitchen. The fireplace. Communication, they wrote letters. Okay, I'd like you to practice the vocabulary that's it's in your guide. This is your guiding notes, page 10. Take a look at those words. Use the dictionary, and you can practice the words. Make sure you know them well using the Quizlet, which you can link to in the website. All right, then. Let's take a read. So this is Daybook, page 20, from Sarah Plain and Tall by Patricia MacLachlan. Did Mama sing every day? Asked Caleb. Every single day? He sat close to the fire, his chin in his hand. It was dusk, and the dogs lay beside him on the warm hearthstones. Every single day, I told him, for the second time this week, for the 20th time this month, the 100th time this year, and the past few years. And did Papa sing too? Yes, Papa sang too. Don't get so close, Caleb. You'll heat up. He pushed his chair back, made a hollow, scraping sound on the hearthstones, and the dogs stirred. Lottie, small and black, wagged her tail and lifted her head. Nick slept on. I turned the bread dough over and over on the marble slab on the kitchen table. Well, Papa doesn't sing any more, said Caleb very softly. A log broke apart and crackled in the fireplace. He looked up at me. What did I look like when I was born? You didn't have any clothes on, I told him. I know that, he said. You look like this. I held the bread dough up in a round, pale ball. I had hair, said Caleb seriously. Not enough to talk about, I said. And she named me Caleb, he went on, filling in the old familiar story. I would have named you Troublesome, I said, making Caleb smile. And Mama handed me to you in the yellow blanket and said, he waited for me to finish the story, and said, I sighed. And Mama said, isn't he beautiful, Anna? And I was, Caleb finished. Caleb thought the story was over, and I didn't tell him what I had really thought. He was homely and plain. He had a terrible holler and a horrid smell. But these were not the worst of him. Mama died the next morning. That was the worst thing about Caleb. Isn't he beautiful, Anna? Her last words to me. I'd gone to bed thinking how wretched he looked. I forgot to say good night. I wiped my hands on my apron and went to the window. Outside, the prairie reached out and touched the places where the sky came down. Though winter was nearly over, there were patches of snow and ice everywhere. I looked at the long dirt road that crawled across the plains, remembering the morning that Mama had died. Cruel and sunny. They'd come for her in a wagon and taken her away to be buried. And then the cousins and aunts and uncles had come and tried to fill up the house, but they couldn't. Slowly, one by one, they left. And then the days seemed long and dark like winter days, even though it wasn't winter. And Papa didn't sing. So how does that feel? It's a very moving story. Strong feelings for me when I read it. It's powerfully written. For me, it's one of the most powerful bits of writing in all of the day books in grades 4, 5, and 6 put together. I've read it quite a few times now, and now I've gotten to the point where I'm okay. But there was a time when I almost couldn't help having a tear run down my cheek when I read, especially the last part of the passage. It's so emotional. There's such a deep sense of sadness about it. So let's go back and discuss it. So how many people are there here? We have two characters, Caleb and his sister, Anna. Is the father there? No, the father's not there. Is the mother there? No. Do you know what happened to the mother? It seems she died, right? The mother died. She died in childbirth after Caleb was born. The night after Caleb was born, their mother died. And this has obviously been a deep, deep wound for the whole family. Papa doesn't sing anymore. We make an inference about that. Seems like the family used to sing. Did Mama sing every day, asked Caleb, every single day? And the answer is yes. Did Papa sing too? Yes, Papa sang too. Why did they sing? Can you make an inference about that? We know that people sing generally when they feel happy. So we can tell from this that they were a happy family. But we also know that this passage ends with the few words, and Papa didn't sing. 4 words, a 4 very short, punchy 4-word sentence, and Papa didn't sing. Papa doesn't sing anymore, not at all. Yeah, so we know that this death has devastated the family. It happened some years previously because Caleb is now a little boy. Hard to tell exactly how old he is, but he's pretty young, I would say. He's perhaps 6 years old, not sure. So some time has passed since the mother died. So who takes care of Caleb, do you think? There were 4 people in the family: mother, father, Caleb, and Anna. And the mother died. Papa, in those days, Papa just would have been busy out working. They lived on a farm, so he worked long hours on the farm. The only person to take care of Caleb would have been his sister, Anna. And of course, she was just a girl. So that was probably a pretty big load, not easy for her. So Caleb keeps asking about his mother. And why do you think he did that? Probably Caleb wants a mom. Caleb, every kid does, right? Every kid wants to have their mom and dad with them. And Caleb never got to know his mom. So he's grown up so far with a kind of hole in his heart, a hole in his life with no mother there. And so I would say that he keeps asking about her because he yearns for her and he wants to know more about her. He wants to know her better or somehow feel closer to her. And you got to also wonder, so how does that make Anna feel? Caleb always asking about his mother. And I get the sense that she's not entirely comfortable. So he keeps asking about this, and then there's this little passage here. He pushed the chair back. It made a hollow scraping sound on the hearthstones, and the dog stirred. Lottie, small and black, wagged her tail and lifted her head. Nick slept on. This is an interesting passage. It's a whole paragraph that seems to contribute nothing to the plot. It doesn't do anything to further the story development. So what's the purpose of it? It seems like it's setting the mood. It's sort of creating a space. And why, in real life, if you think about it, if there's a silence, what does that normally mean? Usually means it's people are thinking. They're remembering the past or thinking about something. They've gone inside. They've kind of withdrawn from the interaction of the conversation, and they've gone inside. And I think that's what this paragraph does. It creates that space to show you that Anna has kind of gone inside herself. And then she's turning the bread dough over and over on the marble slab on the kitchen table. She's kneading the bread. Obviously, she's doing this because she's making bread. But maybe there's something else going on here. Maybe she's also somehow working out her internal emotional conflict in a physical way on the bread dough. Sometimes we need to do that. Sometimes we need to work out our feelings through our body action. And it would seem to me that that's got something to do with what's going on there. But he goes on. He wants to know what he looked like when he was born. And this is natural. And she jokes around with him. Says he looked like a ball of bread dough. And he says, well, yeah, but I had hair. And she jokes back, not too much. And she named me Caleb. And I would have named you Troublesome, she said, making Caleb smile. The fact that Caleb smiles tells us that she wasn't really being mean to him. She was just joking around with him, just teasing him. And he continues, and Mama handed me to you in the yellow blanket and said, he waited for me to finish the story and said, I sighed, and Mama said, isn't he beautiful? And I was. Caleb finished. So Caleb knows this story. He's heard it many times, and he likes to hear it over and over again. And this is very understandable because he's young and he he connects with the sense of having a mother through the story. But then it goes on. Caleb thought the story was over, and I didn't tell him what I had really thought. He was homely and plain, and he had a terrible holler and a horrid smell. But these were not the worst of him. Mama died the next morning. That was the worst thing about Caleb. My, what is Anna feeling? Here, did she say these words out loud? No, she's just remembering them. They're thoughts that she had years ago, but they've obviously stuck with her. And they're very negative thoughts. She has very negative feeling about Caleb. And why would that be, do you think? Is it because Caleb really was a horrible baby? Or could it be that she somehow she associates Caleb with the loss of her mother, with her mother's death? And even though intellectually, I'm sure she understands that Caleb didn't kill the mother, that Caleb's not responsible for the mother's death. I mean, he was just a baby. But it's natural that people tend to want to blame somebody. And it would seem that deep inside, she blamed Caleb for the loss of her mother. And then she goes in the present time of the story. She goes and looks out the window, wipes her hand on her apron, and looks outside and sees the prairie. Outside, the prairie reached out and touched the places where the sky came down. That's beautiful personification. Though the winter was nearly over, there were patches of snow and ice everywhere, very descriptive. So it's really setting the scene. So you can imagine looking out that window with her. So it's springtime, late spring. I looked at the long dirt road that crawled across the plains. Again, very good personification. So the road is crawling like a centipede across the hills. Remembering the morning that Mama had died, cruel and sunny. Well, this is a very interesting passage because sunny, when we think of sunny days, we think of cheerful, happy times. But here she's remembering the day her mother died as being cruel. That's understandable. Cruel, hurtful, terrible. But it was cruel and sunny. So this is surprising and jumps out at me when I read it, because this is what you call contrast. Contrast is when we put opposites side by side, when you put black beside white. And why do you do that? If you want to make a sign that everybody sees and you want them to see the lettering, you want the letters to contrast with the background so they jump out. It catches your attention. And that's what contrast is doing here in the story, of putting sunny with cruel. It's disturbing, surprising, it's contrast, grabs your attention, and it accentuates how terrible that moment was in her life. They'd come for her in a wagon and taken her away to be buried. This is obviously her mother's body. And then the cousins and aunts and uncles had come and tried to fill up the house, but they couldn't. So why did they try to fill up the house? This is common when someone dies in a prairie town. The friends and relatives and anybody who's close to the family will come by and then share some cake and drink a little glass of wine and quietly reminisce and try to comfort the family members who have lost somebody dear to them. So when they're trying to fill up the house, they're trying to kind of fill up the emptiness in the house that's resulted from the death. But they couldn't. Probably in some physical sense, the house was full of people. I'll bet they did fill up the house. But no matter how many people came, they couldn't fill up the emptiness that resulted from the death of the mother. Slowly, one by one, they left, and then the days seemed long and dark like winter days, even though it wasn't winter. And Papa didn't sing. Yes. So there again,